Jai Hind students, today we are going to study about the chapter of class 10th science, chapter number 8, how do organisms reproduce. Now in this chapter we are going to study the further information of the chapter reproduction, which you have already studied in class 8. So let's begin with the chapter. Before I start with the chapter, the name of the chapter itself suggests that what do you mean by the term reproduction. Now reproduction is a process by which an organism gives birth to new individual of a same species. That means a production of new offspring from the parent one, but it should be of a same species. Now, why is it necessary? It is necessary for the survival as well as increase in the number of population. To maintain the life, there should be continuity of a life, that is through population, so reproduction is necessary for that. If organisms do not reproduce, their population decreases and species will become extinct. Therefore, reproduction is really very important as it is a continuation of a species. Now the question is that once the offspring has born, do they create the carbon copy or the exact copy? So the question here is, do organisms create carbon copies of organisms? Somehow the DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid molecules in the chromosome, in the nucleus, is responsible for the transfer of the characters or genes from parent to the offspring. That means the information which is required for the formation of offspring, that is transferred in a form of DNA to the offspring. Now during reproduction, the reproductive cells produce two copies of a DNA which separate into two cells. The DNA copy will be similar but not identical to each other, so the new individuals have slight variation from their parents. This is the basis for variation and evolution of new species. If you observe yourself, you people, you'll notice that some of your characteristics of your body, it matches with the father or a mother, and sometimes to both. Majority of times your characteristics and your features, your physicality, how you look, it depends on your parents. You are the match of it. That means that the characteristics from both the parents have come to you. And the best characteristics from your parents, that's why there will be a variation, that is changes, that is beneficial for the evolution. Now what is the importance of variation? Variation is really very important if there is a continuation of species, otherwise particular species will not be able to survive. So DNA copying during reproduction is important for maintaining the body design of different organisms to survive in an existing environment. But the environment is constantly changing due to outside abiotic conditions like your heat, temperature, salinity, as well as the count of humidity. If the organism is not able to adjust through the environment, then the organism will not survive. That's why the adaptation is required and variation is also required. And variation would be there whenever there is a reproduction. If there are variation in some individuals of a species, they may be able to survive the changes in the environment. And those species which are not able to survive that changes or adapt to that changes, that species will not survive. For example, you must have heard about various species which are getting extinct. Okay, I can give you an example of moth. There is a particular Siberian moth. It is present in an African jungle. There are two colors. One is black, another one is white. Now the white color was visible to the eagles. So eagles, they ate it down. But the black ones, they were perfectly fine. So what happened? The white one, when they crossbred with the black one, the new color formed, that was of a grey. So there is a variation in the offsprings, and they were able to survive because the crow was not able to, eagle as well as crow, they were not able to see them. So in short, I can say variation of species is necessary for the survival of different species as well as evolution. Two things, survival as well as evolution. Now we come to the types of reproduction. There are two types of reproduction which we are going to study. One is sexual, another one is asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, there is involvement of only one parent to give a birth to offspring, whereas in sexual reproduction, two parents as an individual of a same species is required to give birth to the offspring. Now, before starting with the asexual reproduction, let me tell you that since it is coming from a single parent, the offspring is coming from a single parent, so they do look like the parent component. First, we are going to start with the fission. If you closely look at the diagram of a fission, we are going to take a very simple example of an amoeba through binary fission, which you have already studied in your junior classes. Now, in this method, an organism divides into two. That means the parent itself divides into two when it attains a particular growth. For example, how it happens, once the amoeba, when it attains a particular growth, the nucleus which contains all the DNA content, it starts dividing by the process of karyokinesis. Slowly and steadily, in a third number, if you see at the left side of a figure, third number, you'll see the nucleus is already divided. In second figure, number 2, you'll see the karyokinesis has already been started. In third, the nucleus is divided into two. And in third, you can also see that once the nucleus is divided, slowly and steadily, cytoplasm is also getting divided through the process of cytokinesis. In fourth figure, you'll see that 80% of the cytoplasm has been divided, and in fifth, it is 90%, and sixth, it is already divided into two except daughter cell, which is somehow very similar to the parent cell. So here the parent cell, it died and it gave birth to the two daughter cells. When we come to the multiple fission, in multiple fission, a single parent, it divides into multiple number of a cell. For example, in Plasmodium, we'll say that Malarian parasite, whenever that parasite enters into our body, we'll see that how strongly and the number to which they divide it is very high. That's why we'll get ill, so what we become sick. The difference is that in binary fission, there is one time nucleus is dividing, whereas in multiple fission, it is multiple times then when the nucleus is dividing. Secondly, in binary fission, there is formation of two daughter cells, whereas there are many in multiple fission. Third, there is no cyst formation in the binary fission, whereas there is cyst formation in the multiple fission. Now the next topic is budding. In this method, the parent organism will remain intact, but it will give birth to the offspring without getting killed. How it forms, if you closely look at the figure number 1, it is Hydra. It is an animal species. It belongs to the animal kingdom. A small growth of a bird starts taking place at the side of the Hydra. When it grows slowly and it gets a complete form of a Hydra, it detaches from a parent organism and stands just beside it. So here the parent organism remain intact and we'll get a new organism and offspring. The few other examples of budding is yeast as well. We'll call it as when we use it for making things like bhature and cakes and pastry. It gives fluffiness. And why? Because it divides so quickly. Next is regeneration. Now in this method, a part of an organism, if cut or broken, it will develop into that number of organisms that much it is cut into. If you see the first figure, that is planaria, it is a water organism. Now in this there is one difference. It does not mean once it attains a particular growth then only it will divide. An organism will come in such contact that it will get a cut. That portion, the cut portion, it will divide and form complete organism. If you see in a figure, the first organism of a planaria, it is cut into 3 parts. And what we get that every part has been developed into a complete organism. It can be, we can say that if a planaria has been cut into 5 parts, then we'll get 5 more planarias. Another example is of hydra, which is given. You can see when hydra has been cut from a middle and then the complete hydra is formed. In various animals we have also observed in starfish as well as the tail of a lizard. But there is one organ also in our human body which undergoes this process of regeneration, that is the largest organ of our body, liver. Now the fragmentation. In this method, a body of a simple multicellular organism breaks up into smaller pieces on maturation. Once it gets mature completely, it divides itself into 2 or 3 depending on the growth and maturation. The very simplest example is of a spirogyra. Now the spore formation. In this structure, if you closely look at the figure which is given, there is a structure called sporangia. It produces a tiny cells called sponges which are very small. It is not visible to a naked eye, but when it come in contact with the moist surface, it develops into complete new individual. Now, for example, Rhizopus, mucor, penicillin. If you closely look at the diagram or a figure of it, there is a sporangium. Now it is composed of so many spores. Once air or wind it comes, the spores, they start floating through an air, and wherever it reaches or sips on, a complete new individual will be formed. It is a sort of fungus, we can say. In breads we have observed that on a single bread, when we get some spores out of it, there are 2 to 3 places on a bread where we get it. Next is your vegetative propagation. Now vegetative propagation is very beneficial for us as well. Why? Because a new organism has been produced from a part of a particular organism. In this matter we are mainly, the name itself suggests vegetative, that means we are talking in terms of plant. So here we can use root, stem, leaves in a natural method, of course, to grow a particular organism. For example, from roots we can grow dhalia, sweet potato. From stem we can produce potato and ginger. From leaf, bryophyllum and begonia. We'll take a part of those portions and grow them directly into the soil and we'll get a new. Now, plants which are produced by vegetative propagation, they have different type of a technology because we require a particular characteristics as well as a speedy requirement. So, there are various things, for example, the flowers we want, rose, jasmine, so we can grow it through the vegetative propagation. Now, vegetative propagation is naturally when we start directly putting into, we'll take a piece and sow it in a soil and we'll get a new complete organism. But when it comes to artificial vegetative propagation, by cutting, layering and grafting, we can get the desired characteristic. For example, if I say in natural way, I'll take a part of a leaf and directly grow into the soil. So when the new plant will be formed, it will be similar to the parent. But when it comes to artificial vegetative propagation, we can get the desired characteristic. For example, if you say naturally, we'll get red rose, peach and yellow rose. There are no as such many colors when we talk about roses. But nowadays we are able to see blue roses, black roses, magenta color roses. These are not a natural color. So what we usually do, we use a process of grafting. Cutting and grafting to get the flower of our desired characteristics. Now it's like, do you need that color of a flower? Just name it and I'll get you. So what are the benefits of vegetative propagation as it is required, since we know the population is increasing, so we have to work upon it. So the plants that can bear flower fruits earlier than those produced from a seeds. As you all know how the plant grows, first we sow the seed, the process of germination takes place and then the plant will grow. But in this method, from a portion of already grown plant, we grow a complete fruit and flower in a very short duration of time. Growing plants like banana, oranges, rose, jasmine that have lost the capacity to produce seeds. So in short, we are getting seedless fruits. Genetically, similarity is maintained in a plant. For example, if I want some type of a species and I want it will remain like that only, there would be no variation which will take place, so I can go through this method. It helps in growing seedless fruit, I have mentioned earlier as well. Also, it is the cheapest and easiest method anyone can do it.